am going to go ahead and get us started. Everything okay, Alexandra? All right,
Ready?
super. Great. Um, all right. So I want to welcome everyone this morning in our time zone. Thank you all in India for joining in the evening, and for others in Europe also joining in the evening, or late afternoon, I guess. Thank you for joining us at the Ocean Foundation and our partner, the National Maritime Foundation, for this webinar on a sustainable blue transition for ports and shipping industry. The National Maritime Foundation has become an excellent thought partner for us at the Ocean Foundation, particularly on the blue economy. I think they're doing excellent work that has really helped inform our thinking at the Ocean Foundation and beyond. I'm going to start by telling you just a little bit about the Ocean Foundation. We have over 50 projects in more than 40 countries on 6 different continents. Our mission is to support, strengthen, and promote those organizations dedicated to reversing the trend of destruction of ocean environments around the world. To do so, we focus on 3 main objectives: serving donors through advised funds, strategic partnerships, and diverse initiatives. We use our years of expertise to turn our donors' ocean visions into a reality. Second, generating new ideas. We focus our collective expertise to generate cutting-edge content on emerging threats, potential solutions, and better strategies for implementation. And third, nurturing implementers. We do our best to find, evaluate, and support the most effective marine conservation projects and organizations via grant making and capacity building for marine conservation. Today, among other things, we are celebrating the release of a Springer publication book that is forthcoming. It is entitled Sustainability in the Maritime Domain: Towards Ocean Governance and Beyond. One of the editors, Angela Carpenter, is here with us, and you'll hear from her shortly. This book includes a chapter that we contributed called Greening the Blue Economy, a Transdisciplinary Analysis, and it focuses on maritime transportation and its role in meeting the UN Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm going to touch very briefly on what is the blue economy, because the Vice Admiral is going to speak more about that as well as shipping. There are many definitions of the blue economy. Some include all forms of water, some include the ocean and select freshwater resources, and a few focus only on fresh water. A number of organizations include a sustainability component as a key criterion. For example, the World Bank and some United Nations programs define the blue economy as the utilization of ocean resources for human benefit in a manner that sustains the overall ocean resource base into perpetuity. At the Ocean Foundation, we think of the blue economy as the sustainable subset of the entire ocean economy. Regardless, we can see the blue economy as the key driver to rebound out of the COVID-19 crisis that is still playing itself out. And that rebound will create good paying blue jobs and new blue industries. Once our societies eventually open up, we need to restart development with a very holistic, sustainable mindset. We need to focus on how society can restore economies post-COVID-19 in a way that focuses on ocean health and sustainability, and ensuring that the ocean is available, healthy, and abundant for future generations. To conduct ourselves better in the future, we need bold actions to set the ocean on a course of recovery to support priorities of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we're taking a snapshot today on sustainable shipping and ports. In many ways, shipping was the first form of a highway connecting cultures in distant countries, and trade via marine transportation is increasing. Ships are currently in every major body of water, and the number of ships traveling is only growing. In 2018, 793 million TEUs, 20-foot equivalent units, the standard volume of a shipping container, moved through ports around the world, making up nearly 90% of global trade. While recent world events have reduced the growth of shipping, there is very little reason to doubt that shipping will grow again as the world recovers from COVID-19. Sadly, though, as ocean-based trade increases, so does its environmental footprint. Shipping goods by water is significantly more efficient when considering energy used per pound of goods or passengers per mile traveled than is by car, train, or airplane. However, due to the massive scale of global trade, ships are responsible for a significant portion of carbon dioxide emissions, whale collisions and strikes, noise pollution, and the spread of invasive species. With increasing international trade, we have seen measurable negative effects from the spreading of invasive species and diseases, increased air and water pollution, acidifying waters, noise pollution, whale vessel strikes, and shipbreaking pollution. A healthy ocean generates oxygen and precipitation to support all life on Earth, even as it generates trillions of US dollars in global economic activity. The ocean economy is commonly defined as all economic activities related to the ocean, including activities that are harmful to the ocean and the life within. The subset of economic activities that are actively good for the ocean is, in our view, the foundation for the sustainable blue economy. Incorporating sustainability actions into the maritime transportation sector is necessary to preserve the life support system, restore abundance in our global ocean, and help nations achieve sustainable development goals of the United Nations 2030 Agenda, especially SDG 14, Life Below Water. Achieving these and climate change mitigation goals requires transdisciplinary approaches, integrated actions across disciplines, sectors that transform every element of maritime transportation. Such actions include standardizing inspection and enforcement, promoting solutions to reduce greenhouse gases, designing and building greener ships, treating ballast water with low or no impact technology, installing safer onboard water treatment system, greening port facilities, improving ship safety and emergency response capacity, making shipping quieter so fish can think, operating to avoid whale strikes, and expanding maritime transportation sector engagement in oceanic data collection and monitoring. Some of these actions are already underway. Others are still in need of design and implementation. Whether they form the basis of a sustainable blue economy, together they form the basis of a sustainable blue economy that should define the future of human relationships with the ocean. Today, we've put together an excellent panel for you to talk about all of this. There will be 5 speakers who will each be given 15 minutes to present. I will introduce them each in turn. Their biographies were already provided in the invitation materials. First, I'm going to invite Angela Carpenter, who's a visiting researcher from the School of Earth and Environment, University of Leeds in the United Kingdom, and is also an external consultant and affiliate to the Faculty of Engineering and Environment of the University of Gävle in Sweden. She's going to speak about the sustainability of the maritime domain. Angela, let's have you take it over next.
I'm just going to track down my presentation and share it with everyone. Is that the right one? Yeah. So greetings from the UK, but also greetings from the unpronounceable University of Gävle, which looks nothing like the way it's spelt, and that's in Sweden on the Baltic Sea. And I am still trying to launch my presentation. There we go. So good morning to the Americans, good evening to the Indians, and good afternoon and good day to everybody else. This presentation is going to give a sort of broad brush overview of sustainability in the maritime domain and the SDGs that Mark was talking about. So slightly more text perhaps than is sort of useful, but hopefully you'll be able to read the presentation later and get something from it, and also contact me if you are interested in expanding on the topics. So pollution by man is well known, it's long lasting, whether it's discarded fishing nets that tangle up mammals, the sewage and plastics thrown overboard from ships, oil and chemical pollution from intentional ranging through to accidental like Exxon Valdez, major sources of pollution, and more recently plastics and microplastics coming from land-based sources that are being eaten by fish, etc., and entering the food chain. And as Mark said, although there's lots of visible impacts, many aren't. You can't see the noise that's impacting maritime life and whales and migration, such like. You can't see the atmospheric pollution from the ship's engines. But again, that's contributing to ocean acidification, global warming, and other major pressures on humanity. And maritime transport is a contributor to some of these issues, because it's the foundation really of the global supply chain. 80% of world's seaborne trade carries all those goods that we can't do without. The new bike, which is currently sitting somewhere on a ship coming over from China, which I'm waiting for. And also there's fishing, there's tourism, there's naval operations, and also the scientific research. So lots of different activities from shipping. And these keep the global economy moving. They contribute to global livelihoods. Many millions of jobs globally are associated with fishing and with ports. And without that, you're going to see poverty in a lot of places. And these things are affecting everywhere, you know, from the developed countries through to small island developing countries. And there are lots of positive attributes, but there are also many repercussions from shipping, as Mark noted. And the impact has been a decline in ocean health as there is increased shipping and other maritime activities. But the positive is that the UN SDGs and other measures are there to try and help overcome those issues and try and return and restore the health of the oceans in some way. I'm not going to read through all of this because there's a lot of text there, but the maritime domain is everything that occurs above and below the sea surface and on and below the sea bed. And everyone really, if you think about it, has a stake in protecting the maritime domain and the marine environment. If we don't protect them, what's going to happen for food stocks in some developing countries? How are we going to maintain safe water and such like? And the more that there are problems from ship sinking, etc., you know, we're damaging the environment, and we all need to work towards pushing for better management of that environment. And what is the maritime domain? This is a great image that I found, which pretty much sums up that it's anything that's going on. It might be in the bottom right, there's a diver who is, you know, maybe a tourist looking at fish, but there's a sewage outfall that's contaminating the water and might have an impact on that diver's health. It could be the wind farm, which there are a lot off the coast of the UK that, you know, it's great to generate energy, but it can have impact on fisheries because the local fishermen can't fish in those waters. Aquaculture, if there's chemical contamination, around aquaculture sites. You know, this could enter the food chain, and that there's the two rings in the sort of upper left quadrant, and there's a ship next to it discharging some sort of waste into the sea, so contamination. And then most people are going to be familiar with the UN SDGs, and in particular SDG 14, life below water, is the one that everyone associates with fishing activities. But if you think about it in more detail, which is what I'm going to get to about the book, almost every SDG there contributes in some way, or the shipping and maritime contribute to the SDGs. So, for example, zero hunger. If you contaminate fish stocks, you're actually causing more hunger for people locally. If you want clean water and sanitation and there's pollution entering the marine environment, that can impact on your water. Energy is a good one, affordable and clean energy. Mark mentioned ports and shipping. So if a port provides clean energy generated through solar panels or wind turbines, and a ship can connect to that while in port, the ship's engine doesn't need to work for so long. Therefore, you're actually reducing ship emissions and improving air quality, as well as sort of using clean energy. So moving briefly onto the book, if my computer will work. There we go. This book should be out towards the end of this month, hopefully. And its main aim is looking at providing building blocks for good ocean governance through the next decade, but then going beyond the next decade when the UN Sustainable Development Agenda runs out pretty much in 2030. We actually were seeking chapters and authors that would look beyond that. Where are we going to go in the future? And it's looking at current world problems, not just intangibles, but real life problems, and looking at are the sustainable solutions to being developed now, or are the solutions that could be developed and implemented in the future. And I will say that Springer are going to offer a discount on anyone that would like to purchase the book. So that's my duty to Springer done, that I pushed the book slightly, and also thanks here to Mark and his team for contributing a chapter. And as Mark noted, his team wrote a chapter on greening the blue economy. So that's at the top. There's lots of chapters that have a relationship to shipping. As you see, we're looking at themes like maritime transportation, sustainable fisheries, maritime security, piracy, issues of do we need naval presence in certain areas? What do you do with illegal fishing? We're looking at transport system resilience and measures to combat climate change. Underwater noise is a topic that's come up in a couple of chapters. One in general, its impacts on whales, for example, and then looking at IMO instruments, so quite a dive into the technicalities of what the IMO do. And we're also looking at things like gender issues in the maritime industry, which is shipping and ports, and less than 10% of employees in ports are women. I think it's around 2% of employees in the shipping industry are women. So there's a distinct gender imbalance, and that's something that I and a team from Yevle have been working on recently. And how are these SDGs and shipping related? So for every SDG, there's a number of targets. I've called them tasks here, but I use it interchangeably with targets. And as I said, SDG 14 is considered to be the most relevant, but the others, almost every single SDG has either some direct or indirect relevance to maritime and marine issues. So, for example, ending poverty. And one of the targets is building resilience to climate-related extreme events. And here we've got the people facing the threat of sea level rise if they live in coastal and low-lying areas. We're seeing many more severe weather events, for example, in the Gulf of Mexico, and the islands in the wider Caribbean have all been facing quite severe weather impacts over the last few years. And although that is one aspect of it, shipping is a major contributor of greenhouse gases, and anything we can do to reduce emissions might help reduce the risks of climate change events. But it does not, it's better to do something thinking that you might have a positive effect than to do nothing and have no effect at all. We need to consider what can we do. SDG 14 is life below water. And again, it has 10 targets, not all directly associated with shipping, but you can actually look at them and think, yeah, we can do things here that again make shipping more sustainable and make it possible to sustainably manage and protect the marine coastal ecosystems. And a few more of the targets from SDG 14 are here. And as I say, I'm not going to go through it because 15, I could talk for an hour on this topic, but we've got 15 minutes. So please read, if you'd like to read the presentations afterwards and then get in touch, I'd be more than happy to have a discussion with anyone in the audience. And briefly going through a few of the other SDGs, ensuring healthy lives by reducing deaths, illnesses from hazardous chemical and air, water and soil pollution and contamination. So here, there is a direct relevance to shipping. There's a long history of accidental and intentional pollution from ships, and that pollution can directly impact on food chains, particularly if they occur close to land. For example, we had an incident in North Wales which significantly affected mollusks and other foodstuffs that grew locally, and for 2 or 3 years they were still finding contaminants in the shellfish, and that can enter the food chain, so it can directly impact human health. And the other one is chemical spills. You don't necessarily see the chemical, and if someone doesn't report it, again, that can enter the food chain, and it can be things that are carcinogenic, cause cancer, because I've forgotten the word, and other hazards to human health from, for example, contaminated shellfish, food poisoning and such like. SDG 6 is ensuring access to clean water and sanitation. And again, directly relevant to shipping. If someone dumps sewage waste or garbage overboard in coastal waters, that can wash ashore, it can be visible and wash up on beaches, so that's easy to see. But what about when it contaminates water sources? What about the grey water from showers and sanitary waste that maybe a ship decides it's going to discharge it in a port, but that puts added pressure on local sewage plants? And for desalination, which is a major issue in many areas, trying to get fresh potable water, if a ship discharges chemicals or invisible substances or even plastics or things, that can actually contaminate or hamper and damage the desalination plant. So there is a direct link there. I'm not sure how I'm doing for time. So ensuring sustainable consumption production patterns includes a target to encourage companies to adopt sustainable practices. And that's again directly relevant to shipping. We really want shipping companies and port companies to adopt those sustainability practices, report on what they're doing, present examples of best practice. Because a port could have, Yevle in particular has done work on dredging contaminated sediments to open up the seaway so that ships can actually access the port. But instead of disposing of it and removing the chemicals, they've come up with a tangible way of using contaminated sediment with other substances that can build new land, and the contaminants cannot get out of that substance. And I can provide a link if anyone's interested in discussing that topic. But that's opened up the access to ships. It's reduced contamination in the environment around the port, and it's also reduced substances either going into landfill or having to be dealt with to remove chemicals directly. And other methods for sustainable practices might be speed reduction measures, and we have a chapter in the book about that, which results in lower greenhouse gas emissions, lower noise, and also can impact on underwater noise issues. And then blockchain is a technological solution tracking goods through the supply chain and providing enhanced security. But it also means that ships can spend less time in port loading and offloading because the goods on board have already been tracked through blockchain. So that actually is a good practice for shipping companies because it means that they use their time more efficiently. Climate change action under SDG 13, briefly mentioned that already, but anything that causes a delay to a ship accessing a port, which might be sea level rise, so that the cranes no longer can actually access containers to remove them, or other severe events, is going to disrupt the global supply chain. And we saw that a month ago when Ever Given was hit by a severe wind and sandstorm in the Suez Canal, and my bike was on a ship behind Ever Given and had to turn around, so I'm still waiting for my bike. So, you know, there are issues. Something as simple as one ship blocking a key waterway for a week has had a massive knock-on effect to the global supply chain. Other ships were left unable to deliver cargoes on time. Costs went up for transporting goods by sea. And that's just from one windstorm, and it was unanticipated, unexpected, and highly unusual weather event. Life on land, interestingly, also includes targets to reduce pollution from sea and impacts from sea. So alien invasive species, like I think it's the zebra mussels that got into the Great Lakes area. Ships that aren't carrying cargo have to have ballast water on board. And so various microorganisms and the eggs of various species can get transported. And as soon as the ballast water is discharged because the ship wants to load up on its next journey, these small organisms can enter freshwater ecosystems. Tidal estuaries, we had a problem with a particular sort of crayfish in UK waters that has become dominant and eats the natural species around there. And also, as cargo is taken from a large ship onto smaller ships that travel inland, these species can travel with them. So again, although it's known as life on land, this SDG 15 also has a direct and tangible link to shipping. And so in summary, I showed you the image previously of all the different activities with the maritime domain. All of them are interconnected, including shipping. So whatever is happening in one activity can have a direct or indirect impact on another activity. And shipping has a lot of impact, as I say, through ballast water discharge, through polluting of sewage waste and grey water, accidents causing oil spills and such like. And all of the SDGs are interconnected in some way and can have a direct or an indirect relevance to shipping. So we have to look at the maritime domain in a holistic way. We can't just look at shipping separately. We have to think about how it integrates with the port industry, and then potentially how does that connect to land transport and so on. So it's one large interconnected global supply chain, and the SDGs, as I say, connect directly to shipping and all those other wider aspects of it. And as I noted during the talk, if you want to discuss anything raised in this presentation, there's a couple of different emails, mainly because the Yevle one has a tendency to be a bit temperamental. So there's also my NTL World email there. There's more information about the book, and please feel free to get in touch with me on issues around shipping, around ports. I've been working in this field for more than 20 years, so I can at least have a conversation, and maybe I can continue to learn things, which is always good. So thank you, and hopefully I didn't run on too much.
Thank you very much, Angela. You are just about on time, so this is wonderful. Next up, I want to invite the Director General of the National Maritime Foundation, Vice Admiral Pradeep Chauhan, who's going to speak about the current state of shipping in India and the role of shipping in India's movement towards a blue economy. Vice Admiral, it's a pleasure to work with you on this and everything else, and I look forward to hearing your remarks.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you, Angela. That was simply scintillating. I thought what we would do is talk about Indian shipping and afford some context to our part of the world. The National Maritime Foundation is, as you can gather, an Indian think tank. In fact, it is the only Indian think tank that really concentrates upon the entire maritime domain in all its holistic forms. And so we are pretty much, I think, the only sensible game in town, insofar as the Indians are concerned. And our interaction and our engagement with the Ocean Foundation has been a rich vein of hugely valuable nuggets of information, of thoughts, of research, direction, and for all of that, we are deeply grateful to the Ocean Foundation. So I also wanted to say that much of the generic part of my own presentation has indeed been covered by Angela, but I hope there will be some things that I can offer for your consideration that are different. So let me, as she said, see whether we cannot get the presentation running. I wanted to start with this quote by from Li Xiongni, who's a professor in China, and he says that when a nation embarks upon a process of shifting from an inward-leaning economy to an outward-leaning one, the arena of national security concerns begins to move to the oceans, and this is a phenomenon in history that occurs so frequently that it has almost become a rule rather than an exception, and yet there are many, many governments of countries that are littoral, countries that are coastal, countries that are islandic, where this realization doesn't seem to have dawned. Insofar as India is concerned, we live in a particularly busy part of the world ocean, that is the Indian Ocean. And here we have more than 120,000 ships that transit the busy international shipping lanes that crisscross this oceanic expanse on an annual basis, with the Strait of our east itself accounting for more than 90,000 ship transits every year. And to our west, we have the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, which similarly accounts for 22,000 ships a year. Now, given that there are only 12 months in a year, 120,000 ships annually makes 10,000 ships per month. And if you divide that by 30, and you can keep doing the math, and you will find that this is an extraordinarily busy transportation of Piccadilly Circus. Now, all this shipping, as Angela and Mark have both said, increasingly adds low and medium frequency noise that degrades the marine acoustic habitat. It has a very large carbon footprint, and it contributes to marine pollution in a significant manner. If this was 1950, and it was one of those good old days, then all national cargo would be carried on national flag shipping, and nations could effectively control their ships and their shipping. And that would mean that nations could direct their merchant shipping to fly certain routes, to avoid certain sea areas, to actually embrace certain shipping lanes or traffic zones. And all this could be done both domestically under the cabotage rules of the given state, or it could be done by foreign-going vessels of that country's merchant fleet, because all its cargo would be carried by its own flag vessel. But now we have this other situation where you have actually no correlation between owner, flag, crew, and cargo. And while our mental constructs, and in many cases our legal constructs, and certainly our bureaucratic constructs, are based upon, let's say, row one, where you have an Indian owner, an Indian flag, an Indian crew, and an Indian cargo. In actual fact, you could have any one of the variations and say, for example, number 11, where Indian cargo was being carried on a foreign flag vessel with foreign crew and a foreign owner, and absolutely no control whatsoever being possible. So national control of shipping is now pretty much an impossible activity. And what this means is that the ability of nation states to actually be the predominant actor within global shipping has dwindled. If you take the merchant shipping fleets of Great Britain or the United States of America, they are negligible in terms of the flag of the USA or the flag of the United Kingdom that is flown on those ships. Whereas in the east of the Suez, the situation is different. China flies its flag on most of the ships that carry Chinese cargo, but they also fly their flag on most of the ships that carries everybody else's cargo. So while China has indeed some ability to control its shipping, the cargo that is carried is completely outside the control of everybody else. What about India? In 1998, we had 480 ships on the Indian register, and they accounted for about 34% of India's imports and exports. And on the 31st of December 2019, we had more than tripled the number of ships on our register. We have 1,429 ships, but they account for only 7.45% of Indian cargo. This means, not only does it mean what I've just been harping upon in terms of the ability of states to control, but let's talk about the coastal area. Within the Indian coast, of the 1,429 ships in our register, as many as 972 vessels, that is 68% of the fleet, was engaged in coastal trade. And while that might in and of itself indicate a thriving coastal seaborne trade, that's not the case, because the tonnage carried by these 972 vessels is only 11.6% of the total Indian gross tonnage. By corollary, although only 457 vessels, that's 32% of the fleet, was deployed for overseas trade, they accounted for 88.4% of our total gross tonnage. What does that mean? That means that we've got a whole lot of 972 ships that are actually pretty inefficient. They are unable to carry large cargoes commensurate with their numerical strength. What does that mean to climate change? It means that we've got a whole series of problems, not just limited to global shipping, but specifically to Indian shipping. In terms of technological advancement too, the Indian merchant shipping fleet is far from comfortable in its position. A merchant fleet comprising largely of old ships is likely to be technologically outstripped by its competitors, and this is the tack that we're taking to try and drive urgency into the government's mindsets. But in terms of climate change, in terms of maritime pollution, in terms of the deleterious effects that Angela and Mark have already specified, our situation is grim. Let's look at the age of our ships. We've got 53.7% of the overall fleet and 49, almost 50% of the foreign going fleet being more than 16 years old. And their construction and their outfitting technology is clearly out of step with modern global safety, modern efficiency standards, and also carbon efficiency requirements, priorities, practices, etc. So this is the actual problem area. That means that ships of this vintage are hardly likely to be actually able to comply with the IMO's regulations. And that means, in turn, that either they will land up in the gray list or the black list of one or the other conventions, or they will end up paying severe penalties. And one of these penalties, of course, in general terms, not in financial ones, is, as I just mentioned, the inability to meet the far more stringent IMO regulations that are now in place for pollution control measures. If you look at zero carbon technologies for shipping, we already have examples abounding of, Mark is very fond of using this expression, the greening of the blue economy, and I think Angela mentioned it as well. Personally, I really have a contrary view. I think that the expression is completely wrong. And what we should be doing is bluing the green economy and not greening the blue economy. So if we look at even diagrams or screenshots that we pick up from the internet, we still find that we're talking about green technologies. We should be talking about blue technologies because we're talking about hydrogen as a fuel for large vessels. But if we could talk about ocean renewable sources of energy actually producing that hydrogen, then we're talking not only about green hydrogen, but we're talking about blue hydrogen. And this is the way I think that we ought to be going. We in India, we're just reading about this, and our industry and our shipbuilding management by government and bureaucracy is not even doing that. Compliance with IMO regulations, of course, as all of you know, is enforced largely via port state control, MOUs, whereby a port state carries out inspections of foreign flag shipping to ensure compliance with extant regulations that have been promulgated by the IMO. And our problem here again is that, well, on the one hand, we've got the earliest port state controls, of course, MOU being the Paris MOU, but let me draw your attention to the blue one there, which is the Indian Ocean MOU of 1999. We're now in 2021. So we're 20 years or more down the line from there, and yet we're nowhere near achieving the kind of compliance rates from not only Indian flag shipping, which is of course the subject of my presentation, but perhaps it's important to draw your attention to the disaster that is being perpetrated by developed countries of the West in particular, as they withdraw or see no reason to encourage their own cargo being carried on their own flag shipping, permitting and in many cases encouraging their shipping companies to actually adopt flags of convenience or open registries, where the stipulations and the mandatory testing conditions are even poorer. All vessels, as far as Indian law is concerned, Indian and foreign, entering into the maritime zones of India are subject to the relevant positions of the Air Pollution Act of 1981 and the Environmental Protection Act of 1986. Great, we've tick marked both the check boxes. We can't be faulted. But the problem is that these legislations have very little specificity, as I will come to. Insofar as maritime pollution is concerned, Angela has dwelt upon this. I won't waste your time on ballast water management issues. Suffice it to say that just today or tomorrow, we will be putting up on our website a fairly detailed article on Noctiluca scintillans. And this Noctiluca scintillans is a set of phytoplankton that have been actually introduced in large measure by ballast water mismanagement occurring between the East China Sea and the Arabian Sea. I'm not going to plug the article too much, but I certainly hope that many of you will find the time to read it. So yeah, we have all signed the Ballast Water Management Convention, but I want to point out that there are many exceptions. Let me talk to you about this particular one on your extreme right on top. It says this doesn't apply to ships of a party which only operate in waters under the jurisdiction of that party. That means that if you had island territories distant from your place of your mainland, for example, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which are closer to Thailand and Indonesia than they are to many parts of India, and you had a ship which was discharged, which was engaged in ballast water discharge and intakes, the whole Ballast Water Management Convention doesn't apply. So there are serious limitations here. As Angela said, if international shipping industry was in fact a country, it would be the world's 6th largest climate polluter between Japan and Germany, and shipping CO2 emissions have increased by approximately 70% since 1990. And if we continue with business as usual and other sectors of the SDG goals actually reduce their own emissions, then shipping could very well represent a whopping 17% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and that is disastrous. So shipping has adopted what I think are self-defeating measures, but they're just very attractive because they produce short-term goals, short-term results. Slow steaming. Slow steaming, yeah, it reduces the amount of noxious gas emissions, but is it an economically viable proposition? Because you need more number of ships to carry the same amount of cargo. So you're nowhere near reaching the levels that you ought to. And in any case, if you've got diesel engines still running, and many of our ships do, then diesel engines below 80% of their loading are, of course, pretty inefficient, which means that they will, in fact, produce greater amounts of emissions. So then there was much hope that the IMO-approved Energy Efficiency Design Index would sort things out. And we found that with this, we hoped that new ships would become more energy efficient, and that, we're now between 2020 and 2024. So ships being built in this period need to have their efficiency of energy increased by 15 to 20%. But once again, there's too many buts. Actually, new ships on an average are less fuel efficient than those built in 1990. Bulk carriers, tankers, and container ships built in 2013 were on the average 12%, 8% less fuel efficient than those built in 1990. And so, I don't know, we need to worry about whether the shipping industry's narrative is in fact factually correct or not. Between 1990 and 2013, ships, not only because their numbers have increased, but because efficiencies have not, are about 10% higher in their overall fuel consumption. And there's not been much change in the last 9 odd years. At least 66% of container vessels, 50% of general cargo ships, and 25% of tankers launched in 2015 already overshoot the requirement for 2020. When it comes to shipbreaking and recycling, of course, India has recently passed the Recycling of Ships Act in 2019, which ratifies the Hong Kong Convention, and yet we hope to double the size of the ship recycling industry by 2024, provide 1.5 lakh jobs. But a significant flaw, once again, in this act is that it lacks any details regarding the handling of materials, the safety measures that are to be adopted for the workers, or any sustainability requirement in the manner of dismantling of ships. And this is a problem area, and it impacts directly upon all the issues that Angela has already explained. So what am I, in conclusion, what are my remedial measures? There are 10 of them. I'm not going to read them all out, but I will say that we need to provide fiscal and policy level support for the induction of technologically advanced ships propelled by environmentally friendly fuel. We need to support and incentivize the building of technologically advanced roll-on, roll-off, and roll-on, roll-off passenger vessels. And of course, we need to have centers of excellence. We need to adjust our cabotage rules. We need to have much, much better legislative and implementation measures. These are all too often, compromises between various stakeholders and their interest groups. We really need to concentrate upon blue shipbuilding, blue ship operating, and blue ship management practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice Admiral. I really appreciate your intervention, and I actually agree with you. I prefer blue to green, so we will proceed in that course. Next up, I want to introduce a representative of another of the Ocean Foundation's partners. Rockefeller Capital Management has been working with us for over 10 years and has been an excellent partner. And I think what you're going to hear next is sort of a unique set of thoughts on how to address some of the problems of shipping and ports that we have outlined, and sort of what happens in the absence of good legislation, as Vice Admiral mentioned, but also what happens when we have legislation and we have an opportunity to talk to the companies. So I'm going to introduce Mia Overall, the Director of Shareholder Engagement at Rockefeller Capital Management, who's going to talk about achieving sustainability through engagement funds. Mia.
Thank you, Mark. Hello, everyone. My name is Mia Overall. I am the Director of Shareholder Engagement at Rockefeller Capital Management, and it is a pleasure to be here with you today. And I particularly enjoyed the remarks of Angela and the Vice Admiral. Thank you. I learned a lot, and it makes me even more concerned and grateful that we have this audience with us here today of interested people all working on this issue. Now, the perspective that I will be representing today is the investor perspective. So I've been asked to discuss two things. One is how investors can mitigate the impacts of shipping and potentially ports, and also give some examples of how engaging with companies as shareholders can begin to make a bit of change. Now, when Mark asked me to join the panel, I quickly said yes. Mark and the Ocean Foundation team, as he mentioned, have been invaluable partners for us and our efforts over many years now, with a real focus on oceans and the blue economy. And so the oceans, as you know, is something that we all recognize as precious and worth protecting. It's also, of course, one of our biggest carbon sinks. And it's protecting us against climate change. But also from a financial perspective, ocean assets are worth $24 trillion. And the blue economy, just to say all the industries linked to the ocean in some way, is worth $2.5 trillion today. And interestingly, expect to grow at twice the rate of the mainstream economy, which is, of course, a huge opportunity and one worth protecting from an environmental perspective, from a financial perspective, from many different perspectives. So at Rockefeller, we have been partnering with the Ocean Foundation for, I guess, going on 10 years, seeking out Mark's input to better understand what kinds of impacts, positive and negative, various public companies may be having on the ocean before and after we invest in them. And so it's been really, really great to have his expertise. And for the first handful of years, we partnered with him on a portfolio of companies, basically whose business model all brings about some benefit to the ocean and to the climate. And then last year, we launched an additional fund. It's called the Ocean Engagement Fund in partnership with Credit Suisse. And this is a fund, it's a portfolio of, again, public companies that all actually have some, or most of them have some impact on the ocean that might not be entirely positive. And so what we have discovered, especially with the very successful launch of the Ocean Engagement Fund last year, is that two things are really becoming increasingly important to investors. One is protecting aspects of nature, including specifically the ocean, which investors have not always thought about. And two is the idea that as mainstream investors, we can work with poor performing companies to drive some kind of improvement. And so that's basically what we're striving to do with the Ocean Engagement Fund, is work with these companies in efforts to reduce their negative impacts on the oceans. And the way this works is we're basically using our position as shareholders to try to make a positive impact by investing in companies that are not all star performers. It means that they have some room to improve. And once we purchase shares in the company, we then essentially roll up our sleeves to leverage our shareholder position to ask them to make specific kinds of changes. So what kinds of changes? Well, we'd like to see them make changes across several themes. One is the carbon transition. Another is pollution prevention. And the third is ocean conservation. So what this looks like in practice is that we're asking shipping companies to reduce their emissions or do other things. We're asking fishing companies to increase the sustainability of their fishing practices. We're asking consumer goods companies to use more sustainable packaging and to cut out microplastics, and the list goes on, right? So by doing some of this, we aim to offer investors a way to be an engine of positive change for the ocean and hopefully capture returns as well. And so what I thought I would do next is share a few examples of some of the dialogues that we're having at this time, right? So we have invested in a handful of shipping companies, as well as companies whose businesses relate to ports and maritime, other kind of maritime infrastructure. What I'm going to do today is focus mainly on shipping, because these are some of the more poignant conversations that we're having at the moment. And so shipping, as the Vice Admiral mentioned, we know that shipping is hugely polluting. The ocean vessels release an immense amount of CO2 into the air as they bring our goods, bicycles and others, from one continent to another. And luckily, shipping companies they are aware of this and they're working to address it. And this is something that we're talking with them about, right? So one of the topics that we have been discussing with them is this shift to more sustainable fuels, right? And so from the companies that we've been speaking with, we know that they're already working on this, right? They're working on rolling out carbon neutral ships. One of them as early as 2023. They're looking into alternative hydrogen fuels such as ammonia and methanol, as was mentioned also by Vice Admiral Pradeep. And one of the Japanese-based companies we've been speaking with believes in the shorter term, the solution may be liquid natural gas, so they're working on that. And one of the European-based companies that we're speaking with is aiming to make all of its ships run on at least 2 types of fuel for all the new ships that they bring online. So these are all constructive steps in the right direction. However, unfortunately, the time horizon is fairly long. For example, I don't see a lot of shipping companies projecting net zero emissions by 2050, which is what might be better to preserve our oceans and avert a climate disaster. So what we're doing as investors is trying to encourage them to accelerate this transition. By shifting to new, more efficient ships, this also means getting rid of old ships. So that brings us to another topic for this industry, one that's already been touched on today, but which I'll share my perspective on, and that is the environmental and the human health impacts of ship breaking and ship recycling, right? And so, this is another key issue, obviously, for the shipping industry. It is hugely polluting and dangerous to human life. So when ships reach the end of their life, they're sent to shipbreaking yards to be disassembled, for the materials to be recycled. And there is an enormously wide range of practices and standards for this. Shipbreaking yards in places like Bangladesh, we have heard we've heard stories of extremely dirty practices where chemicals are just poured into the ocean, essentially. Very lax standards on chemical management, as well as health and safety standards, things like that. Meanwhile, so as the Vice Admiral mentioned, India has joined the Hong Kong Convention, and so we know that there are many shipbreaking yards in India which adhere to much higher standards. Right? This is a very good thing. One of the shipping companies in our portfolio that we have spoken with on a number of occasions has recognized the potential of shipbreaking yards and ship recycling facilities in along India for achieving higher standards. And so they have partnered with ship recyclers there to do things like, put in place, much more stringent standards on chemical management, making sure that the ships are elevated off the ground and not touching the beach, so that chemicals aren't flowing directly into the water, putting in place much more stringent health and safety standards for the people who work in these yards, because the incident rate has unfortunately been very high at a number of them. And so these things cost money, right? Also improving the living standards, improving the housing standards of the people who work there. All of this can be expensive, but is really the right thing to do for human life, for the oceans, just for the long-term sustainability of the industry. And so, companies like this particular European company that we've been dialoguing with, they have made it financially feasible for some of the facilities in Along to adhere to higher standards by themselves accepting a lower price on the old ships, so that the recyclers can then make a higher margin on the materials that they recover. Right, so that's how they've worked it out. Other companies, unfortunately, don't have quite as good of a track record. One of them is, the Japanese shipping company that I mentioned earlier that we have been dialoguing with. We've spoken with them on a number of occasions to discuss things like their commitment to the Hong Kong Convention and to EU ship recycling standards and conventions. And in speaking to them, quite honestly, we realized that they were aware of and committed to increasing their standards. They sounded actually more committed than we had feared. So that was positive. And we're already beginning to invest human capital in doing things like consulting, working with their partners to provide sort of technical guidance and support on reaching higher standards. But we wanted them to not just tell us this as investors on a call, but really commit to it publicly, which would then hold them accountable to not only working towards fully embracing the Hong Kong Convention, but also continuing with these efforts over time, rather than facing some sort of budget shortage and calling it quits or stopping what might otherwise be practices that are heading in the right direction. So we wrote them an official letter on our letterhead as investors, and we asked them, with a very constructive tone, sort of recognizing the work that they had done so far and where they're headed. We asked them to enhance the disclosures on their website about basically their practices, their policies, and their process for certification, for inspection, and working with ship demolition and ship recycling yards, and basically specifically express their commitment to the Hong Kong Convention, and also with additional sort of tracking and disclosure requirements of the EU ship recycling regulation. Even though not all of their ships, enter the EU, nevertheless, that is the higher standard, and we should be striving to reach higher standards globally, right? And so, and they had recognized that some of their demolition and recycling yards in India were already EU compliant, and we also asked them to join the Ship Recycling Transparency Initiative, which I'll speak more about in a few minutes. And so what happened with this particular company? Well, they shared our letter with the CEO and the CFO, and they realized that investors, and very likely other stakeholders as well, including their customers, do care quite a bit about the environmental impacts of shipping. And so they decided to go ahead and publicly commit to the Hong Kong Convention. They placed text about this on their website. We were very pleased to see this commitment. And they also described, in their public, in the things that they say publicly about their work, some of the their efforts to collaborate with business partners and provide them consulting and other technical assistance. And we were pleased with this as an interim step because we do think that it holds them more accountable and provides points of discussion as stakeholders read this information that they have posted publicly, their public commitment. It creates the opportunity for other stakeholders, whether it's other investors or other customers, to have a dialogue with them about these same things. And so that's positive. We also invited them, as I mentioned, to commit to meeting the European ship recycling standards. And on this point, they are headed in the right direction by beginning to systematically inventory hazardous waste materials. And so we see this as a work in progress. And obviously the dialogue with this company will continue, and hopefully their adherence to the Hong Kong Convention will become more pervasive over time, as well as their adherence to EU, the EU recycling standards, ship recycling regulation as well. So that is, so that's one example. Now, one company that has recognized ship demolition and recycling as an industry-wide problem is Maersk, the Danish shipping company, a real leader in the space. So they have actually helped start an initiative called the Ship Recycling Transparency Initiative, and have invited all other shipping companies to join. At this point, they've had only a handful join, but our hope is that they will see more voluntarily sign up. And so what is the Ship Recycling Transparency Initiative? Well, it's interesting because it's really all about voluntary transparency. So as part of joining, ship owners are asked to publicly disclose their ship recycling policies and practices and all the progress that they're making, right, to the Ship Recycling Transparency Initiative, posted online. So, by doing so, they essentially hold themselves to account before key stakeholders, whether it's customers, investors, governments, NGOs, entities like the Ocean Foundation and others, the other speakers here today, and the wider public, right? And so this is movement in the right direction and something that we are encouraging more of. So at Rockefeller, we think that more disclosure is usually better, and that companies that hold themselves accountable to higher standards through policies is a good thing. And we are encouraging the companies that we are invested in to join this initiative and increase their disclosure so that then they can have these conversations and be accountable to all their stakeholders. So to summarize, I would say we see our role as investors as having a duty of sort to push for improvements wherever we can with the companies that we're invested in. And the stories that I've shared are just small examples of the kinds of dialogues that we're having with shipping and as well as other maritime infrastructure companies. But we also have to recognize that, unfortunately, change, it doesn't happen overnight, but it happens over time. And through these kinds of dialogues, we are hoping to make real change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mia. I really appreciate it. And it's such a pleasure working with Mia on these conversations with companies and seeing their reaction to an investment advisory firm like Rockefeller asking them to do something. It's really, really encouraging to have that kind of a dialogue rather than simply talking about legislation or simply talking about doing it because it's the right thing to do. Talking about it being the right thing to do and something that shareholders care about is really exciting. Our penultimate speaker, Dr. Mark Pu, is a research associate in marine transport at the Faculty of Engineering and Technology at Liverpool John Moores University. Dr. Pu is going to speak about climate resilience for ports and shipping infrastructure. Please take it away.
Okay, hello everyone, this is Mark, and thank you for the panel speaker before me, and I have learned a lot from them because they are working in the industry for a long time and engaged with most of the people for in a very great extent. So, and I want to have a very short introduce myself because I've recently graduated in Liverpool John Moores University. I'm working in the same university right now, and I actually not so into the shipping industry because I work in the transportation industry, and then I have a chance to work on a project about how climate change adaptation for the seaports and airports. So after that, I have tried to equip a lot of knowledge that I have learned from the transportation industry or some transportation scientific studies and try to put it into analyze the climate change issues and also the maritime shipping issues. So here I want to intro, because it's just 15 minutes and I don't want to talk it in depth, but if you are interested in it, we can talk about more on this afterwards. So wait for a second. Okay, yes. If you got any question, you can ask chat box as well. So this is, if you guys cannot see the PowerPoint, just let me know. I think it should be fine now.
We can see it fine.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So once I go into this PhD studies, I have found that there's the things I need to know is that do I have some data for analysis, and I found that there's a loads of global ranking of positives there about how the sea level is going, how the precipitation changing in the future. So we, as the previous speakers talk about this also happened in Britain. There's a loads of more storming, and then some will be the sea level rise, and also rather than just sea level rise, there's a more unexpected extreme weather upcoming, just like the hot wave or some snowing event. So so I have done some review on the seaports and the airports adaptation for the climate change, and then we found that there's a loads of issues facing by the seaports and airports. So therefore, we want to know, also except the climate impact assessment, there's a loads of adaptation measures around the world, and then we don't have a very statistical analysis at this moment. So what I've done in the previous year is that I try to setting up some index for the regional cities or the ports, and then also I have to try to produce some international and global system analysis for the whole world. So so I built up some climate change index by some climate data from the UK government, and then we can see this, and then also I try to pick up some seaports in the UK, and then I found that there's some difference between the difficulties between different cities. It's different, so I try to pick up the data and define them and setting up grades, and then I try to evaluate the climate data by some scientific analysis. So, and then I finally synthesizing all the evaluation to by some it's called evidential reasoning algorithm. But finally, what I can get is the most important thing right now. So I can get some climate risk data for different seaports. So which if it is have a higher rank, higher number, which means it's more safe, and if it is smaller number, it's more dangerous. So we know that by different months, we can find that there will be some difference between the patterns of dangerous. So this kind of data can be used for further analysis for the resource allocation, and also we can put some appropriate adaptation measures to some seaports. And then this is okay. This is the months, and this is all the seaports I have analysis at this moment in the UK, and also this is, you can see the pattern of the months, and in different seaports they are different. So also after that, after connecting some climate data, I've also set up some framework for assess the seaport's resilience. Apart from the climate data, I've also collect some other data such as the environmental sensitivity. That means how is the environment there, and also the economy index, and then for the adaptive capacity, I have also considered operational efficiency, the waterside capacity, and then this kind of frameworks, and also the weighting between them is consulted by someone in this industries. So after that, I have also get some data for this. This means which is if it got some higher exposure, smaller number, which will have some higher resilience. So we can find the difference between them right now. And then this kind of data is still in progress, because we have to find some more improvement to see how we can use this kind of data to how to connect all the adaptation right now, or some remedies, or even disaster management at this moment. So it is ongoing. And if you guys are interested in this topic, and if you got some comments, you can talk to me afterwards. And on the other hand, I have also find some crime, and I have done some centrality analysis on the whole global citizen network, but the global citizen network is too big for me to analyze in my computer at this moment. So my preliminary analysis is that I pick up the biggest 136 ports, which is the highest population around the coastal city around the world. So I've picked up them just like Shanghai, Singapore, Manila in Europe. I have picked up London and Rotterdam, something else. So this is it. And then you can see all the spots on this. And then I have tried to grab some data to build up the shipping network like this. And then we can find that some of the seaports in the that we noticed. That means if it says higher centrality, it means the seaports are more important, more ships get in and get out, and so we can. But I have tried to present it in a more statistical way, and then this is the finding, and then we can see that also the global vulnerability is not related to the local vulnerability, which means that there are some seaports which is facing a very high climate issue, but just such like some countries in the Asia, they are facing a high more difficulties by climate change, but we haven't tackled it yet. But it will bring us a very huge damage if we don't tackle it right now, because they are very important ports in the seaports, in the port system. So, and then I have to connect it with climate change and foresee what it was going. I have also designed some ship routing modeling to focus what it will be changed in the future. So this is the kind of result that because they are facing higher climate change issue, some cities, some of the port cities such as Kuala Lumpur, Shanghai, Busan may have less influence in the shipping system in the future. So some of them will have a higher influence, just like Singapore, but because it is based on the geometrical reason, because they have some less influence by climate change at this moment relatively. So, and this is the changes I have found, and so I think I have presented some insights and also some method to assess the global shipping network in this short time. So I think if anyone is interested in this kind of index and we will work together, we can work with some more comprehensive index, and then we can use another perspective like the shipping company, comparing between different shipping companies, or we can put it down into some cruise shipping network as well. And then also we can see the other issue as well, just like the COVID, how it's changing the shipping network as well. So, and then we think that it is near the end of my presentation, but also we can try to analyze the other transportation modes, such as the airport, the road system, the rail system. They are very important and very related to shipping network as well. So we can try to work it on together with some more data, and to see what we can get in the future to protect our shipping network by the changing climate. Yeah, because this, on my perspective, the climate change is keep going, so we have to do something as well, rather than just do climate mitigation. We have some measure need to do right now as well. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you sharing this research, and I think it's going to be very interesting to continue following these questions of how things are going to change in the face of climate, and which ports and shipping infrastructure is more resilient, and how we think about the future. Our last panelist is from the International Fund for Animal Welfare, which has been a partner even longer than the Ocean Foundation has existed. So it's someone I've worked with for 21 years. That was before Patrick's time, actually, so he's not quite that old. Patrick is the Senior Director for Outreach and Program Collaboration at the International Fund for Animal Welfare, and he's going to specifically talk about the impacts of shipping on marine biodiversity. Patrick, take it away.
Thank you, Mark, and it's good to be with you. Thanks to the Ocean Foundation and the National Maritime Foundation for organizing this august panel and discussion. If you give me just a moment, I'm going to have a few slides to share. Okay, is that visible to you?
No.
Okay, one moment. I apologize. Bear with me just for a moment.
Mhm.
I know Alexandra has a copy of the presentation just in case my technical skills don't triumph here. Apologies, Mark and colleagues all.
Do you want us to have Alexander bring it up?
Yeah, if that's easy, and then I'll just narrate you through it, Alexandra, in terms of when we.
Sure, it'll be shared right. Oh, there we go.
Here we go.
Super. How about
Thank you so
that?
much, and apologies to all. It's a privilege for me to join this discussion, and Angela, Vice Admiral Chuan, Mia, and Mark have eloquently covered a number of the issues that I will be touching on, and I'll try and not repeat things that have already been shared, as I am the final speaker before we get into what I know will be an interesting question and answer and discussion session. As Mark noted, we've been collaborators together for quite some time, and for almost as long. The International Fund for Animal Welfare has been working on the issue of sustainable shipping and whale conservation. As an animal welfare organization and one concerned with conservation of species, both endangered and abundant, the lens through which we've tended to look at our interactions with individual shipping companies, mariners, and the sector have been through the implications of shipping for some of the world's largest marine mammals and the ocean, their ocean habitat and the ocean environment on which their welfare and our own very much depend, consistent with the UN definition of the blue economy, the sustainable use of ocean resources for human benefit. Our commitment is to identifying approaches that can promote animals and people thriving together. If you can move to the next slide, Alexandra. We're a global nonprofit organization. We're working in 16 different countries with projects in more than 40. In India, I should mention, we're very pleased to partner with the Wildlife Trust of India on a variety of terrestrial efforts and some coastal marine efforts as well, with whale sharks and other species along the Indian coast. In the context of our work, as I mentioned, we've been engaging with various stakeholders in the maritime industry for more than 2 decades. And the challenges that we've tended to focus on together have been mentioned earlier this morning by my fellow panelists, including the impact on the marine environment through noise pollution, where shipping, local and global, is the principal contributor to human-caused noise in the ocean environment, together with seismic exploration and military sonar, and other impacts, construction and other impacts of that generate noise in the marine environment. These sounds taken together and principally driven by ship noise through the cavitation of propellers on ships as well as ship engines, have tended not just to disrupt the thinking of fish, as Mark earlier alluded to, but also to mask communication and create a sort of fog of noise in the marine environment for creatures that are dependent on acoustics for their navigation, feeding, breeding activities, and communication among themselves with some whale species. So fundamental threats to their survival and welfare through noise in the marine environment. Vessel strikes or whale strikes as Mark mentioned at the outset of our time together, especially in critical habitat areas, are posing some real challenges to the survival of endangered species. Two of those I just quickly cite, and we'll talk a little bit more about the North Atlantic right whale and some measures that we're working on that are emblematic of some progress in this area. But blue whales off the coast of Sri Lanka and along the southern coast of Sri Lanka, for ships coming into Colombo, ships coming into Hambantota. And if you think of the Piccadilly Circus graphic that Admiral Chuan showed earlier in the Indian Ocean, that international shipping traffic is resulting in the deaths just off the southern coast of India and Sri Lanka of some 50 blue whales a year, scientists estimate, are being struck. So the largest creature ever on Earth is being confronted by far larger cargo ships, car carriers, other large vessels, fundamental to international trade. And there are some challenges associated with that. And then, of course, greenhouse gas emissions, as Mia, Mark, and our other panelists have mentioned, as a challenge for sustainability in the sector. There are key projects that we're working on related to shipping. One is saving the North Atlantic right whale. More on that in a moment. Second, as I mentioned, off Sri Lanka, off the Hellenic Trench in the Mediterranean, we are working with shipping companies, local and national regulators, and leading scientists to identify approaches that will reduce whale strikes or ship strikes. These involve either, based on careful study of these animal populations, movement of shipping lanes, or speed restrictions and slow-go and no-go areas for ships seasonally to avoid collisions with migrating present whale species. The two projects that I want to very briefly highlight before our discussion session this morning are our corporate responsibility project and a whale alert app that we have developed. The first, the corporate responsibility project, has to do with monitoring the performance of vessels and companies. The second is a creative tool that we've partnered with mariners and scientists, both government and private scientists, to develop to assist mariners with some of these conservation challenges. Next slide, Alexandra. Thank you. In terms of the corporate responsibility project, both this and the whale alert application were developed in order to increase protection for a critically endangered whale species that swims along the east coast of North America, and it's called the North Atlantic right whale. And as some of you might be aware, it's arguably the most critically endangered great whale species on the planet. There are 360 of these animals remaining, fewer than 100 breeding females, and all manner of measures, both by government, coastal regulators, and shipping companies, are being taken in order to reduce the incidence of vessel collisions, which have been one of the two top threats and causes of death for North Atlantic right whales. The animals aren't dying of old age, they're dying through entanglements in outmoded fishing gear and through ship strikes. And so from their breeding grounds off Florida and Georgia up to cooler Canadian waters where they follow their ancient migratory pathways in the northern spring each year. We are working with a variety of stakeholders to identify where these whales are and introduce seasonal speed restrictions and other tools to reduce those collisions. The corporate responsibility project involves monitoring the performance of vessels against those speed restrictions and recognizing the achievements of companies that are improving their compliance. And we've seen some dramatic and positive results over the past decade with respect to the performance of vessels and companies. Next slide, Alexandra. So each year on an annual basis, we partner with federal scientists from one of our national marine sanctuaries off of the port of Boston. You can see that in the graphic there. And we analyze automated information system data, tracking data from vessels. The International Maritime Organization stipulates that worldwide, all vessels above 300 gross tons will carry this automated information system, these receivers and transmitters. And in US waters, vessels over 65 feet in length are obliged to carry them, and all passenger vessels of a certain size worldwide, for human safety reasons, the IMO stipulates must carry AIS. There's a lot of number crunching and data analysis that goes into it, but for all vessels going in and out of the port of Boston, which is critical habitat area seasonally for these right whales, between January and May each year, individual tracking data is drawn from these AIS systems, and we're able to tell for each transect of each vessel the amount of time that they were compliant with a speed limitation imposed by the US government of 10 knots in season in these critical habitat areas. A report card similar to what you see there on the left in the sample is generated for each vessel, and this report card, as you can see, explains that there, for 82.9% of the transect of the critical habitat area of the North Atlantic right whale outside the port of Boston, the vessel was compliant. Information is shared for each of the transects by that particular vessel for those that are revisiting the port throughout the season. And then a calculation is done showing if there had been 100% compliance, what would the added time for those transits taken together have been, in this case, 14 minutes and 23 seconds. So it's a very detailed report that is generated and mailed to each of the companies. Next slide, Alexandra. So on a company basis and a vessel basis, this consolidated data results in the generation of a letter grade, as used in the US and some international school systems, A through F. And recipients of an A grade receive a certificate of corporate responsibility, demonstrating their commitment to compliance. This is a carrot approach, and we've been astonished at the positive response that we received from vessel masters and company representatives who have received recognition. Similarly, and Mia talked about outreach and interactions with companies across the spectrum and trying to encourage low-performing companies to do better. And we have been meeting with companies that are not and engaging with companies that are not yet doing so well. We don't yet share that data publicly. Next slide, Alexandra. Thank you. And just to show in the aggregates here, based on 2019 data, we're seeing very strong compliance. And this is a dramatic improvement since the imposition of this speed restriction in 2008, with almost 50% now receiving an A+ grade and a dwindling number of non-performing companies. And I think that awareness over this period of time of the regulation has been of assistance to mariners, and we've sought to increase and deepen that awareness through this report card project. The vessels are being monitored increasingly now, up and down the east coast of the United States, on the west coast of the United States as well. This is a growing trend by researchers, by public advocacy organizations, by ourselves, by industry and others. We've also exported similar programs to New Zealand and Australia, and this is a coming trend internationally that ultimately I think will wash up on the shores of many countries worldwide, including India. Next slide, please. Just to note the evolution of a real-time monitoring system showing company by company. You can see Maersk, one of the companies that Mia mentioned, a leader in the sector on many environmental issues, is one of the first noted here. This is a whalesafe.com, and is an online tool based on the project that I've outlined for you, the corporate responsibility project that has now been put in place around particular ports on the West Coast. A more dynamic capacity technology is allowing now real-time and near real-time tracking of vessels moving through critical habitat areas. So in addition to the myriad international, national, regional, and local regulatory requirements that ships are dealing with, there's increasingly a publicly accessible and public pressure aspect that is developing and encouraging companies to do better. Next slide, Alexandra. So in addition to monitoring, we wanted to enable mariners on the bridge of a ship, and particularly ship's pilots who are bringing large vessels into port for the final last mile or two of their transit into port facilities up and down the east coast of the US, the west coast, and as I'll outline in a moment, internationally as well. We wanted to provide a tool that would enable awareness and compliance by mariners and help put whale protection and whale conservation literally into the hands of the mariner. And with that in mind, we partnered again with government scientists and academics and created an app called Whale Alert. It was launched in 2012, initially focused just on right whale critical habitat around the Port of Boston. It's a geosmart tool aimed at reducing ship collisions. And it provides at a glance awareness for a mariner as to where they are relative to some of these regulatory areas that are drawn from federal government maps. So their position is shown. And then there's also an indication, as you can see there in the screenshot, of the areas in which whales have been heard or sighted over the last 14 days. Are there concentrations of whales moving through this area, and each is date signatured. And that's a combination of acoustic buoys in some instances that are increasingly proliferating around ports and harbors that are listening for whales in the marine environment, acoustic gliders that are being deployed that are picking up different species sounds and on surfacing, firing that information up to satellite, where it's in turn being consolidated in various databases, both government and private. Citizen observations, whether on a vessel or from shore. Overflights for the critically endangered right whale. There are government and private sector observations being made from researchers that are airborne researchers throughout their migration. And mariners are able very efficiently and quickly to mark when they have seen a whale to alert their colleagues who are using the same shipping lanes. As I mentioned, this is international use is increasing. Alexandra, next slide. And so the dramatic impacts, literally, on whale species are shown there on the left, both a ship strike in the top shot, and then unfortunately a right whale mortality, a right whale calf from propeller damage to that animal earlier this year on the southern coast of the United States. But through an integrated tool that is assisting the mariner in showing the speed restrictions and regulations, the presence of whales through acoustic detections and citizen sightings, safe passage for both whales and large ships is increasingly being achieved around critical ports in critical habitat areas. Next slide. We're about to release in June next month a 3.0 version of the app. It is built as an international platform. We don't yet have researchers sort of behind the curtain, working behind the scenes, uploading data to shared databases to populate the app in each case, but it is a downloadable app that will reflect where you or where vessels are at any given time, and it's available at whalealert.org in the App Store and in the Google Play environment as well. And it will have a more robust set of capacities and be gathering data from a wider variety of sources to enhance protection. We are rolling the app out in Europe. The Port of Oman is already using the app. And through IFA offices, we're in discussions in a number of countries and regions about potential application in key ports, much in the same way it's been pioneered on the east and west coast of the US. Next slide, Alexandra. And as I mentioned, whalealert.org, there's additional information that will be updated and refreshed upon our launch in June. These are United States examples of where these two projects have incubated, if you will, the corporate responsibility and Whale Alert. But I think broadly emblematic of how how civil society is beginning more and more to engage on these issues, and the advent of the publication coming forward in terms of sustainability in the marine domain that Mark and Angela were alluding to earlier, the increasing scrutiny with which Rockefeller and others are looking at this sector, the elaboration of the remedial recommendations and measures by Admiral Chowdhury earlier, and Mark's discussion of the implications of shipping on some of these challenges, I think all reflect a growing focus, and we certainly in our organization are committed to taking that work forward in as positive possible a way as we can, and very much in that vein, thank you for the opportunity to be with you this morning, and I look forward to a good discussion.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Patrick. This is a fantastic last presentation. We have gone a little bit over time, so we don't have as long for a discussion, but let me try and move through a little bit as quickly as possible. First of all, there was a question about whether slides will be shared. The answer is that with permission from the speakers, the presentations can be shared with all who have registered for the webinar. We will provide you with contact information for the speakers so that you can do so. There was also a question raised for Dr. Mark about accounting for uncertainty in future projections of climate change impacts in his risk index, which he has already answered via the chat if you are interested in that question. Patrick, there are two questions for you. One was, how are individual shipping companies in the sector responding to the initiatives, which I think you've already sort of touched on. And the second one was what work you're doing with regard to noise pollution. What is IFA doing to address noise pollution in the ocean? But I do want to go ahead.
I saw Nitin's question there and would be happy to follow up subsequent to this discussion. I'd say that the principal measure being encouraged is speed restrictions, slowing down, slow shipping, which has a dramatic positive impact, which is to say it reduces dramatically the sound in the marine environment from cavitation. There are, as has already been reviewed, constantly engineering changes. The IMO has looked at propeller design through its Marine Environment Protection Committee. So some positive work underway there as well to reduce underwater noise.
Excellent. And then Anil Devli from INSA had a comment regarding ship breaking. Do you want to unmute yourself and give us your short comment, please? All right, that doesn't seem to be coming through. That cannot unmute, I see. All right, you are now unmuted.
Yeah, I've got it now. Thank you. Vice Admiral Chavan, thank you. Good to see you. The one point that I thought I should make to the Rockefeller is in respect of the shipbreaking industry, and since they're not here, I speak on their behalf because we've been working very closely with them. The problem was that we had to get the Indian shipbreaking industry to make investments so that they would be HKC compliant. I'm putting it very quickly and in need of time. Now they've gone and made all those investments. They're huge investments. They've gone and complied. We've got close to about 17 yards, when I last remember, who are Hong Kong compliant. We've gone and passed legislation. But then the problem is now that in the vicinity, Bangladesh and Pakistan have not complied with HKC, and vessels still get purchased by both those countries, get broken in by the method of beaching. And what this has done is that the Indian shipbreaking industry is actually now regretting and saying, my God, why did I ever go back and comply with the HKC? So this is a point of view that needs to be borne in mind. And then to add insult to injury, we believe that the EU came up with a Hong Kong plus legislation. Now the EU SRR, as it is called, requires you to do something Hong Kong plus. And all I'd like is to explain to the Rockefeller Foundation and all of you here that it would be also useful, while on the one hand that it's necessary for India and to improve its facilities and probably try and comply with the EU, it's now getting more and more difficult for us to be able to tell our people who are working in the shipbreaking industry that, well, you invested money in becoming Hong Kong compliant. Now, don't worry, we've got one more step which has now suddenly come up, become EU compliant. And then day after tomorrow, there will be something else compliant. So it would be important for everybody to bear in mind what has happened in reality and the need to also put some pressure on the EU to try and assist or take opinion in a manner where some benefit would be given to these shipyards for having taken that first major step of Hong Kong compliance. We are saying this mindful of the fact that a very large portion of merchant vessels today are owned by Asian ship owners. And INSA has worked very closely with all the Asian ship owners to try and get the Indian shipyards to comply. So I just thought this point of view may be important for the Rockefeller Foundation to kind of form an opinion. If you find it useful, we'd be happy for you to speak about this, because it will definitely push the case also for the EU to adopt a more legitimate action on this issue. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Anil. Mia, do you want to say a couple words on that?
Yeah, if I can just respond. Thank you very much for that comment. It's helpful. I appreciate you bringing it up. It's it's probably simply worth noting that I just would like to clarify, we're not actually the Rockefeller Foundation. We are Rockefeller Asset Management. So the foundation is a separate sister entity that makes grants to organizations. So Rockefeller Foundation might actually be a good entity to reach out to for some sort of support on that. I really cannot say. What we do is invest in public companies. And so the position that we take would be the public companies that are using the shipyards, right? And so thank you for your comment. I think this is something that we can discuss with the public companies that we own shares in.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much. Given that we only have a few minutes left before the top of the hour, I wanted to give Vice Admiral Pradeep the final word to bring us to close. And again, Vice Admiral, thank you for joining with us and co-hosting this panel and conversation.
Thank you, Mark. It's been an absolutely pleasurable experience and a greatly educative one too. So I would like to say thank you to all our brilliant panelists. You really brought many facets to bear. Now, the question that we need to close with is really, where do we go from here? And how important is it to either widen our scope or narrow it down to specifics? And this is a conundrum which I think Mark and I will have to jaw about because both need to be done. There's one point I wanted to definitely make, and that is that success in our endeavor to actually transition to a blue economy, concentrating in this particular case on ports and shipping, it requires, I think, three elements. One of them is the criticality of engaging industry. If we do not engage industry, this is going to be a non-starter. What is industry then driven by? Two factors, both of them have been quite clearly brought out. One of them, I think, is the profit motive, which is hardly anything new. The other is a more important and relatively more recent motive, and that is international image. And how a company is now viewed internationally in terms of its image for corporate responsibility, for mindfulness of the environment, actually either enhances or detracts from the company's bottom line. And this competitiveness of image is something that I think that we could take very good advantage of. And the second major success stakeholder is, of course, governments. Governments are likewise driven by two motives. One of them we would like to think is public policy and public mindedness. I'm a bit chary of that. But the other one is certainly international image. Once again, image of how a country or a company or a government is viewed is quite similar in many respects to how companies are viewed, and therefore we may well be able to establish a common ground there. The last one, which of course was dwelt upon at some length, but I think is weak, is that of the lay public. Let me try and explain how we might go and then wind up with that, how we might go forward. Let me take a case where we just heard the horrific statistics of 50 blue whales being killed every year, either because of propeller damage or because of ship collisions in the southern portion of India and Sri Lanka. Okay, this can be handled in a number of ways. One, we excite a large number of people who are genuinely concerned and hope that their collective voices will move either industry or government or both. And I think that the intent is full of nobility and the chances of success are extraordinarily low. The other one is to say that what if, for example, this is purely an example, India is deeply invested as a country in terms of a trilateral relationship between India, the Maldives, and Sri Lanka. And this trilateral requires meat. If it's a trilateral bone, it requires meat to be put upon it. Suppose we were to say that the best way to sustain coastal habitation, the best way to establish India's footprint, and if it wants to be a leader that imprints its footprint on this area, is to maybe promote roll-packs shipping, roll-on, roll-off passenger shipping. Now, unlike cruise shipping, roll-on, roll-packs shipping sort of doesn't have anything inside it to attract the passengers. You can just see cars or cargo. This is boring. But that makes it essential for the passengers to look outside. And outside, what do we have? We have the blue whale, we have whale spotting, we have pristine dolphins, we have pristine waters, gambolling dolphins in pristine waters. And if we could sell that, that means that if a ship was to sail from, let us say, Cochin in the west coast of India, sail across the Lakshadweep Islands, which are coral paradises, do coral snorkeling, do coral tourism, enhance tourism there, move the ships down at slow steaming speeds across to the Maldives, to Malé. Why would a person go on a ship when he can fly? Because when he flies, he can't see the dolphins, he can't see the whales. But for him to see the whales and the dolphins and the whales have to be there. And therefore, it becomes essential for government, for shipping industry, for all the rest of us who are in any case concerned, to be able to concentrate our efforts in a geopolitical framework which will excite governments, in a commercially viable framework which will excite industry. And then I think that we might be able to hit all of these targets. Of course, this requires much more debate than time will permit me. So I just wanted to end with 2 points. One of them was with regard to shipbreaking, of which enough has really been said. But it is so important a factor that for countries like India, I think as Anil Devli has already said, we have to find some balance between retaining comparative geo-economic advantage, which means that our shores allow for beaching of ships, sustaining and increasing the employment opportunities, maximizing health and safety, and minimizing adverse environmental and ecological impacts. So this is a subject that cannot be dealt with in a series of 20 or 15-minute presentations, and therefore perhaps it requires all of us who are stakeholders in this process to engage with each other and find out, as Anil Devli pleaded perhaps to the wrong people, some way of doing this. On the east coast of India, we have a port called Dhamra. It's a private port. It's the only port that I know of where they have actually adopted mangrove cultivation as a port protection resilience measure. Mangroves are what this area is famous for. So if we can show that rather than investing in concrete tetrahedrons, if you could invest, on the other hand, in mangrove cultivation, having the same resilience enhancement, we think we have a workable model. So I will end with that, because it's not my intention to identify a whole series of new topics, but I will end by saying thank you once again, collectively and individually, to each of our panelists, and most especially to both the National Maritime Foundation and the Ocean Foundation, and Mark Spaulding in specific terms for bringing all this together and allowing us all to have this wonderful meeting. So Mark, I will do a graceful exeunt left at this stage and hand it over back to you.
I don't think any more needs to be said. Thank you all. Thank you to our panelists. Thanks for our guests for joining us and listening. We've gone a little bit over time, and I want to be respectful. Thank you, panelists. Thank you for your time in preparing and presenting, and have a great day, everybody, or a great night if it's late in the evening for you. Bye-bye. Thank you all.
Thank you.